almost any decision that Mary Moriarty made, they created a moment where she became more of a polarizing figure because we were in this backlash phase. Seeing this activity by these federal agents that are a part of law enforcement and violating or perceived to be violating constitutional rights of individuals that are not committing any crimes or causing any threat to folks, I think it has put the conversation back on the table and back in the national spotlight of how do we make sure we have a system where people are not having their rights violated by the very people that are supposed to be protecting them.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
How have things been in your district as far as like ICE activity and the community response?
Community response has been great. I'm proud of my neighbors, the way they're showing up in the rapid response groups, going out patrolling, showing up when agents are there to record things and make sure that people aren't getting harmed or trying to stop people from getting snatched. But we had a parent who had taking her kid, waiting for the bus, was snatched the other day. I had another constituent in a Hy-Vee, a grocery store parking lot, was snatched and taken. And he was Native American man, citizen, was prevented from actually sharing his information to show that, was taken and then released hours later. I got a report prior to this surge. I got a report that another parent and one of the elementary school's parents had been taken away. They had to figure out how to take care of those kids. So we've got some problems here, just all over the state. It's happening.
Yeah. Well, local democracy moves on. Our national democracy may be failing us right now, but elections are happening. And this is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Joining me today, the first in a series, I hope, of Hennepin County Attorney candidate episodes. Cedrick Frazier is a state representative running to be the next Hennepin County Attorney. Currently represents District 43A, which includes New Hope and Crystal, which is just northwest of Minneapolis, in the House of Representatives. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. Appreciate it.
So you've done a lot of things. You have been, here's the research I've done. You've been a planning commissioner. You've been a city council member. Of course, now you're in the House of Representatives. Done a lot of other things. But why did you want to get into politics? As a civic-minded person, I can think of one or two things that motivate me to care a lot. So I'm wondering, what are those one or two things that got you motivated?
I think it goes back to my childhood, John. And when I often want to talk about this, I talk about kind of my political inspirations or just folks that inspired me growing up. And so I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And when I was a young person, Mayor Harold Washington was elected as the first Black mayor of the city of Chicago. He passed away when I was in second grade, and I still remember the coming over the intercom system, sharing with the school that he had a heart attack, that he passed away, in a moment of silence, just commemorating and remembering what he meant to our city, and especially what he meant to little young Black and brown boys and kids, right? The inspiration that he had, and it was a lot of what he talked about. He talked about the Rainbow Coalition, not in the sense the way Jesse Jackson did it, but in a sense of bringing everybody together, because, as you know, historically, Chicago was a really segregated city. But what Mayor Harold Washington understood and believed was that everybody needed something, and that there was enough resources to make sure that we can take care of everybody in a really positive and equal way. And so he ran on that, and he was very successful on that. And for me, it's always been my thought about politics is an inclusive politics, a politics that sees everybody, hears everybody, and tries to ensure that the systems that we have in place are working everybody in a fair and beneficial way.
So going back to the ICE issue, there's been a lot of talk about will this be appropriately investigated and prosecuted? Doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of motivation to do that on the federal level. Yeah. And so is it realistic to expect justice in this case ever?
I think it can be. I've been having a lot of conversations about this, obviously, after Renee Good was shot and the feds are basically said, we don't see a reason to investigate the case. And they tried to demonize and villainize Renee Good. And they're still trying to do that. But when I look at this from a local level, you had someone in our community, in our state, in the city of Minneapolis, in the county of Hennepin, that shot someone and killed someone. And those cases are always typically investigated by local authorities. And in the case when the feds are involved, it's done in tandem with our Bureau of Criminal Apprehension at the state level, working with the feds to investigate those cases, to bring all the evidence forward, and then to turn that evidence over to make an evaluation about whether or not that case should be charged. There is nothing that prevents our local authorities from doing an investigation themselves. We still have access to tons of video footage that has multiple angles of what happened. We still have access to eyewitness accounts that were there at the moment that it happened, that some were giving statements via news right shortly after it happened. We can look at all that information. What we don't have access to is some of the evidence that is critical, the vehicle, the officer, the agent that took the shots, and then the agents that were there to witness that as well. And those things are critical. We also don't have access to the autopsy information yet, and I know that hasn't been final as I understand it. But that's some critical information that you need now. But that information does not stop you if you want to take a look at this case and move forward and make a determination, if you have enough based on the evidence that you do have access to bring that case. And ethically, a prosecutor has to be able to say, we have enough evidence to take this case, charge this case, and take it to trial and get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, that is the ethical standard, but we can look at the evidence that we can gather to make that determination. I say all that to answer your question. I say that long answer to get to your question that, I think that with all of the evidence, with all of the video footage that we're recording, not just with Renee Good, but everyone, all of the instances that we're able to record and have evidence, have video footage of pictures of eyewitness testimony of these situations that have happened where it appears to be violations of constitutional rights, those cases we can still take a look at down the line and potentially have accountability for those. What I've been telling folks, this could be similar to the Nuremberg trials, where they happen after the fact. You have to gather all the information, and then you could go in and you could take a look at it, and then make determinations on how you could hold people accountable that were doing very terrible things during that time.
This isn't just about one agent, obviously. Like, this is a systemic problem. They seem to be hiring people, selling them on the idea of go into our cities and rough people up and lay down the law. And so there's a lot of people out there breaking the law, I think, violating people's rights.
Yeah. Well, John, that's what I'm referring to when I say, we won the one that has been the most prevalent, obviously, especially in the state of Minnesota and nationally now, is what happened with the killing of Renee Good, right? But we know that there were other folks that have been killed by ICE agents. There was a gentleman killed in Illinois by an ICE agent, right? Those cases are now. There was another gentleman shortly before Renee Good was killed. Those cases now are resurfacing because of what happened in Minneapolis, when that agent shot Renee Good. And my point is that we can collect all of that evidence, right? There's no statute of limitations on murder. So we can collect all of that evidence, and we can review that evidence as we get it and take a look at it and determine whether it's here in Minnesota, whether it's in Illinois, whether it's in Portland, wherever these things are happening. We can review that evidence and we can make determinations after the fact to determine if we have what is needed to meet the standard, the ethical standard of what a prosecutor needs to try those cases, charge those cases, and try those cases to hold people accountable. So I have not lost hope that could still happen. It's not, and it will not, and it has not happened immediately. And I will say our systems don't work fast either. I think that's the thing too, is that they never work fast. They never happen overnight. And I think about it in this sense. I was so I was very happy that Mary Moriarty and Attorney General Keith Ellison had the press conference that they had and said, "Hey, we're being shut out by the feds, but we're going to ask our local officials to gather as much evidence as possible. Here's where to submit it, and we're gonna preserve that evidence so that we can review this evidence and then make a determination." I remember the feeling when George Floyd was killed, when folks died, that there was not going to be accountability, and that is when things got out of hand. That's when things kind of the top kind of blew off, and we saw the mass civil unrest that we saw in our streets. So I think that did a lot to quelch that kind of feeling that I was feeling, and I was very concerned about if people thought there was not going to be any avenue, any path to accountability.
So we've seen the pendulum swing locally since 2020 from that fierce desire to hold police accountable. We saw Chauvin convicted. We saw the officer who murdered Dante Wright was convicted. And like since then, more recently, pendulum has kind of shifted back towards more law and order rhetoric and politics. And now with this ICE killing and ICE activity, I feel like there's more appetite for accountability for law enforcement because it keeps swinging back and forth. Do we still need to fight against the idea that police accountability and public safety are in conflict, as if we can only pursue these reform priorities or justice for law enforcement when crime is relatively low? Like, how do you see that?
I think there's always going to be, and I think you're absolutely right. I think we were, and I think a lot of what Mary Moriarty has experienced was being firmly in the midst of the backlash, right? To taking a step forward, to have a system that holds everybody accountable, regardless if they're wearing a badge or not. If you're violating someone's constitutional rights, you should be held accountable. To this rhetoric around law and order. I hate the politics of public safety. I think the politics should be kept out of it. I think we should just have a system that we make sure we hold people accountable when they need to be held accountable, and that everybody knows that, and then that creates the trust. But I think this backlash you're talking about is exactly the reason why, almost any decision that Mary Moriarty made, they created a moment where she became more of a polarizing figure because we were in this backlash phase. And I think you're absolutely right. Seeing this activity by these federal agents that are a part of law enforcement and violating or perceived to be violating constitutional rights of individuals that are not committing any crimes or causing any threat to folks, I think it has put the conversation back on the table and back in the national spotlight of how do we make sure we have a system where people are not having their rights violated by the very people that are supposed to be protecting them.
Are you ready to become a lightning rod? Do you think that's going to happen to you? Like Cedrick Frazier, he's soft on crime. He's too reform-minded. He's too much of a softy progressive. Like, do you think you could avoid the kind of backlash that Moriarty has faced?
You know what I tell folks when I talk about my background and one of the reasons why I wanted to run for office. Like I said, I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a community called Inglewood. For those that are not familiar with it, you can do some research on that and look up that community, especially look up that community in the 80s and the 90s when I was growing up and coming up through that. The crime rates were off the chart. The homicide rates were leading the nation. The crack epidemic was deeply embedded and overwhelming in the community. What I never heard during that time, was people saying that, and we had inequities in our system, but people saying that when people are terrorizing or harming the community, that they should not be held accountable to ensure that harm was stopped in the community and to break those cycles and loops of violence. And that is the mind frame I bring with me, is that we just need to have a system that if when people are committing harm or terrorizing the community, you hold those individuals accountable. That is one way for people to trust the system. That is one way for people to understand. And it's also a way for deterrence for that kind of behavior to happen. So I'm going to lead from that lens. And at the same time, I'm going to lead from a lens understanding that we have true inequities within that system. And if we don't clear up and disrupt those inequities, we also have great mistrust within the system. And that mistrust leads to a lot of the reason why we can't solve a lot of the heinous crimes that we have within the system, because you have communities that don't believe the system is looking out for their best interest to keep their communities safe. to your point about whether I'm ready, I'm absolutely ready for what comes with being a lead in this office. I've been a politician for a little bit, almost a decade now, and so I'm not this. None of this will be uncommon territory for me. I'm a Democrat. I'm very well versed in partisan politics. I hate how it has stagnated a lot of the progression that we should have, not only in this state, but in this country. But I'm also very well attuned to and very well familiar with how folks will try to villainize or make you into a lightning rod to further their political goals. So I'm absolutely ready for that. And I'm also ready with the relationships that I have and the skills that I have to be ready to counter that as well.
So maybe you have a little bit of an advantage over Mary Moriarty in that you have, you've been an elected official, you've been into the politics more than perhaps she was prior to being elected.
I definitely think it'll be helpful.
So this may or may not become a litmus test issue in this race. Is like, I've seen some of your campaign materials. You say you will never work with ICE. Like, do you feel like you feel like that's going to become a litmus test, or you feel like some of your opponents may perhaps work with ICE?
I can't speak for my opponents, but what I can say is that I'm listening. Folks are listening to what they're saying. It's particularly in this moment. None of them have been as vocal about protecting, constitutional rights and individual rights and having accountability the way I have in this moment. And I think that's important, especially if you're going to be a lawyer for the people. You have to be in tune with what's happening with the people and what it is they want to see in their system, so they can trust that system. What I can say is I can't speak for them, but I can only talk about how I would interact with those agencies in moments like this.
Do you have any big ideas you'd throw out for people who are concerned about violent crime? Like, what do you bring new to that to help fight violent crime?
I think when I have a real focus on getting to getting upstream to try to make sure we can prevent as much crime as possible. The one thing I tell folks is that, and I'm never going to promise to do things that I know the office can't really perform. Right? We're not crime fighters in the sense that we're not officers out in the street. We're not those folks. We get the cases brought to us. Then we have to look at the evidence. We have to make a determination if we can charge those cases and if we can win convictions on those cases if we charge them. My goal will be to work in tandem with all of the justice partners, including law enforcement, city officials, mayors, city council members, county commissioners, to ensure that we have a well-resourced office and that we can work on partnering with local community groups, school districts. And I'm already having these conversations. How can we identify, specifically for our young people, how can we identify folks that may be going down a path that could put them at risk to be tied to our criminal justice system, and instead find them, say, hey, we see what's happening right here, what you're into. Here's some positive options. Here's some things that you can get into that will be positive, beneficial to you. You may be learning some new skills to get a job. We set you on a path to go to college. These things will make sure you have better outcomes in your life. And then I'll say to them, but if you don't avail yourself of these opportunities that we're providing for you, there are consequences for that. And these are the consequences that we don't want you to experience, but that you will likely experience if you continue down this path. And I think that is something that the county attorney should be hand in hand and in tandem with law enforcement, with school districts, with community groups, with parents, with local elected officials, to make sure we're putting and investing as much upstream so that we don't have to pay that cost on the back end. Not only as the money that we have to house people, to incarcerate them, but also on the back end in terms of the positive lifelong goals, lifelong achievements that they could have that are going to be failures there, which also have a net negative on our communities.
So another question based on some of the campaign materials that I've seen. What does appropriate and effective accountability for youth look like? Like, I think in those materials, your campaign is speaking of making it clear there are consequences for actions, which is something I've heard people like Chief O'Hara talk about. Like, kids are out, doing these things like there are no consequences. It is just fun for them, to paraphrase Chief O'Hara. Like,
Yeah.
has the system failed at providing those consequences over the last 5 or 6 years? And like, how has it failed, and what needs to change?
I think the system has failed in terms of having resources to where when we have young people that may be going astray in a path that could lead them to have interaction with our criminal justice system, we don't have places for those children, for those young people to get them back on track. We closed our homeschool years ago. We have a juvenile detention center that's is not the best kept. Needs a lot of work. So when we have young people that this is a real thing, right? It's a real thing. We may have young people that are in situations where they're not safe at home. They're in environments that are not safe for them, and because they're in those environments, they're out in the community doing very harmful things. You often hear the thing, hurt people hurt people. Well, if we have resources where we can actually apply intensive resources to get those folks back on track, which means that we may have to take them away from the bad environment that they're in right now, but house them somewhere and then get those resources to them in an intensive way to get them back on track. That is a positive for the community and for that individual. And I think what we failed as a system is actually have those types of places readily available for them. Now, as a legislator, I've been working on things just like that. We did a pilot program. We passed legislation for a pilot program in Ramsey County that will set up 5 sites within the region, within the county, that young people can go to, that will be secured places when we have to take them out of environments that are not healthy for them and not safety for them, but get them the resources they need, and then we'll go from there with the whole intent of making sure that we can hold them accountable, get them the resources they need, and then ensure that we're creating a safer community, but also creating better outcomes for those young folks.
So how do you imagine you'll be different in this job than Mary Moriarty? Or the same, different or the same?
I think the biggest thing is what we talked about up front. It is my resume that is a bit different from Mary's, right? You mentioned a few things from the research you did out the front, that I've been a planning commissioner, I've been a city council member, state elected official. Also, I'm currently a labor attorney. So it's those various perspectives that I have, I think, are very different than what Mary has, coming into this role. And I think it's those very perspectives and those different circles that I believe all kind of overlap in a way in terms of how they impact the community as a whole and people as a whole. I can lean into those relationships that I have, the experiences that I have, the lenses that I have from all of those, and work with people to kind of move the office forward to create a system that's going to work and be fair for everyone. I think that is probably in large part the biggest difference. And then also my lived experience. This office has never elected someone that is actually coming from the community that has been from communities that have kind of had the disparities within the system, and from communities that know exactly what it is, what they like to see to have better outcomes. And that credibility is going to be huge when I'm having these conversations with community members about what we need to do to make sure that we're holding people accountable, but doing it in a way to definitely make sure that we're creating safer communities for everybody.
And maybe some things that you think will continue the same, some priorities she has that you share that you would like to continue?
One of them, we talked about youth earlier. Be at school is a big deal, right? I mean, again, when we can identify our young people that may be going down a path that is not healthy for them, is not going to create great outcomes, and we can intervene and get them the resources they need and get them on track in a positive way, I think that's a powerful tool. Again, it's the upstream thing, it's the intervention piece to prevent terrible things from happening down the line, to get them on the right track. That's one thing. The conviction integrity. We want to make sure, again, when we're talking about building trust within a system, we want to make sure that people know that if you have a situation where someone has been incarcerated, and then we later take a look at their case and find out that person shouldn't have been incarcerated, we want to make sure we can rectify those things. It's all about building trust for the system to make sure we're creating something that works and is fair for everyone.
So listeners may have heard during that answer a giant dog shaking itself, I think is what I heard. Do you have a giant dog?
I have like a 50-pound dog. I apologize.
Okay. Wow. My ears. I could pick out a giant dog shaking itself. 50 pounds. What kind of dog?
He's a lab boxer mix.
Okay.
And his name is Puckett.
Puckett, named after the baseball player?
That is correct. And the story behind that, my wife is a huge Minnesota sports fan, Twins fan. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Kirby Puckett attended high school with my mother.
Okay, wow. All right. So talking about the stakes in this election, do you think there's a risk of backsliding on reforms if the wrong person is elected?
Absolutely. One of the reasons I decided to run is because I was concerned that, and again, in this moment of backlash before the moment that we're in now with these federal agents causing some harm in the community, in this moment of backlash, I believe that most of the folks are going to run on, we've got to take public safety back. And the question I would always have, and when I'm talking to folks, I say, you should ask them, where are we taking it back to? When was this system working for everyone? When was it ever great for everyone? When was it a fair system for everyone? Those are the hard, direct questions you should be asking to make folks explain that. And I have heard candidates in this race say exactly that. And so for me, I do have concern. I've heard people say, look, but I've heard also voters say, we don't want to go backwards. We want to keep moving forward. We want everyone to work together, doing that very Minnesota way of doing things, being collaborative and respectful, but we don't want to go backwards. And so I'm here as a candidate to make sure to say, we're going to have change and the county deserves that change, but that change has to be moving forward. It has to be someone that is moving forward. And that's the kind of leader I'm going to be, continue to move forward.
So Mary Moriarty's office recently announced a new policy on youth interrogation, things like ensuring an attorney is present, because often young people give away their rights without realizing how important that is. Not using statements extracted by police, using techniques that are known to induce false confessions, and then to the extent possible, no police interrogation in school settings. You don't have to give a long answer necessarily, but like you agree with all of those policies?
Yeah, we talk. In fact, these are conversations we've had at the state level with legislation to try to. We have these debates in committees and on the floor within our respected areas. And I think again, it goes back to making sure we trust the system. And when we're talking about any kind of situation where you're using tactics that can induce or produce statements that are false. Or misleading to end up with convictions, then we have to clean it up on the back end. I would love, for me, the goal is to not have to clean those things up on the back end. Do it the right way. Make sure due process there. Make sure they have representation. Make sure we're not having tactics that are going to create false statements or false information. I think about a young person that may be terrified and just wants to go home. They will say what they need to say to get out of it if they believe it's going to get them out of that situation. And I don't want to have, that makes it harder for the prosecutors to do their job as well. If we can't depend on those statements and depend on that witness and that evidence, it has a big problem with impacting cases that it may be very well be someone that needs to be prosecuted and they're causing harm to the community. But if we have a statement that later a defense attorney can show it was coerced or received in an inappropriate way, we're going to have a problem with keeping the community safe, because those kind of technicalities have an impact. And now we could be letting someone else back out into the community that is harmful to the community. And we need to try to avoid those at all costs. And
no longer prosecuting most felony cases arising from low-level traffic stops, like equipment violations and expired tabs. Yeah. Something you agree with?
Yeah. Well, I carry legislation around this. Okay. So I can tell you, and I started carrying this legislation right after the killing of Dante Wright. Because the reason that traffic stop, as you may recall, was engaged because he had something hanging from his rearview mirror. And, I believe it was an angel that was memorialized in his aunt that had passed away. And so for me, those type of when we have these kind of engagements based on these kind of pretextual situations that can escalate and rise to a tragedy like that, we should try to avoid those as much as possible. So I know that some people disagree, but there's a lot of nuances to that policy. It's not saying that if you pulled someone over for an appropriate reason, and then there's a reason to search the vehicle and you find weapons that should not be there or drugs that should not be there, that those things aren't going to be prosecuted. It's just a matter of if you're using these pretextual stops just as a way to kind of do a fishing expedition into someone's vehicle, we should not tolerate that. Again, this creates a lot of mistrust between law enforcement and the community. And at the same time, when those cases are being prosecuted, it creates mistrust between the prosecutor's office as well. So again, I'm really focused on how do we have practices and policies that really push us toward making sure we can build the most trustworthy relationships with our community and also with our other justice partners to do this work and to keep our community safe.
And I apologize for not being familiar with your legislative record because I pay as little attention to the state legislature as possible. just local
you're
politics
a smart guy,
for me.
man. You're a smart guy.
So, I don't. You anticipating there are going to be candidate forums? I imagine you anticipating a lot of scaremongering. Are you ready to be the person who bats down the fearmongering when that comes up in somebody wanting to be the law and order candidate coming after you? Are you ready for that?
I am. I mean, I think so. I've spent. I was I've been the vice chair of public safety in the legislature. That's every committee meeting. That's every committee hearing. That's every conversation that we have when we're passing public safety legislation off the House floor. I'm ready for those conversations.
Okay, you've already had Republicans coming at you on a daily basis, so this is easy stuff for you. Going back to the federal government, I was just thinking today about there was this criticism from a Star Tribune columnist against Moriarty when she was calling it a turf war when she wanted to prosecute Vance Belter, the man who assassinated Melissa Hortman and her husband. And since then, during our recent troubles, we've seen federal prosecutors resign from the local U.S. Attorney's Office in protest over orders to go after Renee Good's wife. The DOJ appears to be threatening political prosecutions of Walls and Frazier, really just destroying any sense that we have an impartial justice system. How much trust should we have in the FBI that frequently works with local law enforcement? Federal law enforcement works with local law enforcement all the time without controversy before this. And how much faith can we have as a public? And are there steps you can take if elected, in response to kind of mitigate those things?
Well, I think the thing is, before this, we've never had a problem working with our federal agencies to hold people accountable, to do investigations, which could lead to holding people accountable, and to make sure that we're keeping doing our part to keep communities safe. I mean, this really is, everything's unprecedented now, right? I mean, this really is another one of those in a long line or a string of unprecedented moments where we're seeing this type of reaction to where we're being shut out of an investigation and just being told, well, we're not even going to investigate someone being killed in broad daylight in one of your cities in your county. We just don't see that. I mean, that doesn't happen. What I can promise people is that as your local leader of your prosecuting office, that we're going to do everything we can to, when those things happen in the community, to make sure we can investigate those cases and try to do the appropriate things to make sure we can hold people accountable when the evidence says that's what we need to do. But in this moment, when you have the federal agencies reacting this way, I do think you lose a lot of trust. People are losing a lot of trust within these systems that we have historically been able to trust to do this work. I mean, you think this is really reverse of what it was like, for my grandparents and parents that grew up during the civil rights movement, right? I mean, it used to be the feds were the ones that came in to force the states to actually follow the law and respect constitutional rights of the citizens within those states. Now we've got the states fighting as hard as they can, but of course we're out-resourced by the federal government. We don't have the same kind of resources, but this is very, very, very much unprecedented. And we used to depend on the feds to come in to make sure things are right. Now we have to make sure we can have strong local leaders to make sure we're standing up for the rights and the respect and humanity of our folks in our state.
Yeah, the roving gangs of white supremacists have become agents of the state, and we're all here depending on states' rights to save us.
Yeah. We're in a tough spot right now. But what I'd say, this country has been in tough spots before, and we have shown of kind of resilience to come out of it. And these are scary times right now, but I still believe, and particularly from the way I've seen Minnesotans show up for their neighbors and their community members and their families and friends, that we can get through this. We're gonna have a lot of work to do to repair things, and it's gonna take a while. It's not gonna happen overnight, because this destruction didn't happen overnight. But I do believe we can get on the other side and move forward together.
Is there anything we didn't get to that you feel like is important to communicate about your campaign here?
I think, I think the main message people should take is that, we're going to have change because Mary's not running again. But we're going to have change. We're going to have a new leader in that office. And I think what they need to know about me is I'm the leader that is focused on continuing to move forward, continue to make sure we're building a system that works for everyone. And I'm going to include as many voices as possible because I think having broad coalitions helps with trust, helps with people being seen with dignity and knowing that their voice matters and that we have systems that care about them and we want to do the right thing. And if folks believe that that's someone they want, and I believe they do, that they want that seat to be the next leader, then I welcome their support and I hope that I can get their support.
Okay. And obviously caucuses are coming up and you want people to be delegates to, there's going to be a county convention. Is that where the endorsement is going to happen?
Caucuses are coming up. Thank you for mentioning caucuses are coming up February 3rd. So please participate in caucuses and remember to raise your hand to be a delegate for Frazier for Hennepin County. And then we have our county convention, which is a separate thing. That's going to be on June 13th. So you have to specifically say you want to be a delegate for that county convention and you want to do it for Cedrick Frazier, Hennepin County. And then I'd love to see you and I'd love to have your support.
Okay, Representative Cedrick Frazier is running to be the next Hennepin County Attorney. Thank you for joining me.
John, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And this has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.